As I was growing up, my dad relocated with our family, with his work, about every 6 months to a year. And we didn't go close. We moved from south to north to the middle of the country, and I got to hear all the dialects as I was growing up. I made a list of the states that we lived in. We lived in Louisiana, but I was born in Mississippi. We also lived in New York, Kansas, Iowa, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, before settling in Missouri.
Okay, so my family grew up in California, and we moved to the Midwest when my sister and I were a baby.
I moved from Texas to Missouri.
So I grew up in South Texas, moved to Missouri, and lived there for 5 years, and I noticed a couple things about my speak that was connected to my identity.
Language and identity have always been something that I have struggled with. So I have gone to predominantly white schools pretty much my whole life, and it's definitely been a journey to be okay and to be comfortable with my identity as a Black person through how I speak.
I noticed, like, almost every time that I would go home for Christmas break and then come back, people would say that my accent was thicker than when they had experienced me in Missouri, which was new for me because I'd never really thought about the fact that I had an accent, especially for a Texan, just compared to many other Texans that I know. I feel like I didn't really have one.
And so growing up, a lot of my friends' parents would call soda pop, and it was a really Midwestern thing, but I grew up saying soda instead of pop because of my parents' how they were raised.
A lot of teachers, people just, that are in a place of authority over me in the past, they would come to me with the intent of giving a compliment and saying, "Wow, you are so articulate." They would be shocked by it, and they would say it with the intention of validating me, saying, like, that's good, the way you speak, that's good. And it's because I spoke like I was white. Now that does something to a young African American child. You feel as if you're doing something right, but then your Black peers are saying, "You talk like you're white. You talk like you're white," and you're just like, okay, so I'm just a little. It gets confusing.
There are a few things that I realized about my dialect being tied to my identity, and a lot of them kind of revolve around maybe like jokes or insults are the two things that I initially think of that people in Texas certainly understand, but other people might not be. Maybe tied to geography, and so making fun of people who are from a certain place in Texas because you think it's pretentious. So like Austin is a common place, people make fun of people from Austin because it's pretentious, or making fun of people because they're from like a backwater city, and so people from Austin make fun of people from College Station for that reason. And so I think that's such like an Austin thing to say is something that people just don't understand in other places. And so I realized how much I tied like just like random jokes and comments to my identity, and how people just didn't understand that anymore.
Various phrases where Missouri friends would say, I have never heard that before, include when I would go to the gas station to put gas in my car, I would refer to that experience as gassing up, or I'll be back, I'm gonna go gas up my car. And often people will point out that they'd never heard that phrase before. They would say fill up or put gas in my car instead. So I still say gas up. Apparently that is something unique to at least like the region I grew up in. Idioms like 6 one way, half a dozen the other, when you're describing a scenario where it's either or, like similar outcome, no matter what option you choose. Very, very often people would be like, what? I've never heard that before. 6 one way, half a dozen the other. But they were familiar with the phrase stuck between a rock and a hard place.
One of the times I realized all these accents were a part of my upbringing was when we moved back to Missouri. People kept calling my mom Margie, and it sounded really weird and nasally, like Margie. And what's funny about that is my mom's name is Margie, but I had just spent a year in Boston where everybody referred to her as Maggie. And it only took about a year for me to be convinced that that was my mom's name. So I was very aware of the difference between Boston and being in St. Louis.
So let me, break it down, So what I was, as I got older, what I started thinking about was, okay, so you're saying I'm articulate. Why are you saying I'm articulate? Because I sound like this. What does this sound like to you? This sounds like how a white person would talk. And you're complimenting me because I don't talk how most of the African Americans speak. And that's implying that that's the wrong way to talk. Why is it wrong? It's breaking those things down step by step by step to understand where is that racial bias and how, and also just taking a second to think, how is that going to affect that child?
But almost every time I say y'all, people react in Missouri because very few people say y'all. And so that would always remind me, oh yeah, I'm not from here. I didn't grow up here. I didn't learn to speak here.
I had a horrific time learning to read. If you can imagine, I was the age moving different schools as I was getting all those initial skills together. One memory that's really strong is I remember I was in a class and it was all about vowels, and I used to have nightmares when we had to do the vowels, because wherever I was, the difference between how we spoke at home and school must have been so profound, I guess, that I could not tell the difference between an A, an E, and an I. And I'd see the word pig or rat, and I was just a train wreck trying to get it right, because I imagine the accent was so strong. And unfortunately, because I was little, I wasn't mature enough to, I tried to explain to my teacher, like, I'm not hearing this. Looking back as an adult, it would have been so great if someone's like, where are you from? Your accent or our accent obviously doesn't match you, and there would be a challenge learning to read during this. Something else that stood out is my brother did not have this experience at all. He's only 18 months older than me, and he flew through school. He had no problems whatsoever. Now he's doing the same moving that I'm doing, yet doesn't seem to be struggling at all. And I remember asking my mom about it one time. I was like, what was the difference there? Why was I a train wreck and he was doing so well? And she's like, well, actually, he always wanted to read when he spent time with me. So she's like, all my time with John was reading to him and working with him on his reading. You just wanted to play. So I imagine my mom sitting down with books and books with John and playing Barbies or whatever with me. And then it dawned on me, he learned to read with a matching accent that he had. My mom taught my brother to read, and that was reinforced at home. And then I was thinking through it, realizing when you're reading, there's no accent involved or no dialect change that would throw you off, which was not the case for me. I wasn't taught to read at home, and I needed to rely on this ever-changing dialects from these teachers that I had.
And a lot of Black people will talk about code switching, about how in professional settings or just in places that aren't casual, you'll start talking like this. It'll sound different. It'll be, as someone once told me, more palatable. Never say that to someone. Yeah, that's a whole other thing. So I remember I was an ambassador in high school, and you greet people. You're coming into the school, you want to make a good impression. So, but just my outward appearance, that immediately kind of makes people like, I don't know. They get a little worried. So in order to reassure them that I was okay, you talk like this. Hi, how are you? I'm good. I'm Jessica. You talk like that. And then they're like, oh, okay, she's not one of them, And I know some people think that that's not real, that doesn't happen. But, I was an ambassador, and people, I remember this one specific instance where a woman, she saw me, I was holding the door for her, and immediately clutched her purse really tight to her and was like looking at me. And I hadn't said anything yet. And then I said, hi, how are you? And then she was like, oh, I'm good. And it's moments like that kind of affect you and makes you think, okay, so I need to talk like this. I need to talk as if I'm white in order for people to feel safe, in order for other people to feel comfortable. Because it doesn't matter who I am, it doesn't matter how I grow up, it matters about making them feel safe and comfortable. And that affects young Black people, and as they're growing, it affects older people too,
I still say y'all. I will never stop saying y'all. I don't care. Bring on the hate, bring on the shade.
It's a journey, and it's a journey that a lot of people have to go on. But just let people be people. Accept them for who they are. Don't make them be one type of person. You want diversity. You want differences. That's what's beautiful. That's what's desirable. Because making someone feel like their culture, everything that they are, just to make somebody feel like everything who they are is not desirable will really, really affect someone in a way that you don't even know, even if it's a subtle thing, like saying, you're so articulate.